The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me are Thomas Sanherho. Hi, Thomas.
Hi, Dom. How's it going?
Very well. And Father Michael Gossett. How are you, Father Michael?
Very good. It's good to be here.
Yes, it's good to have you back. It's been a while. I was mentioning before we started recording that we haven't had you on for a while. The schedules haven't matched up, but I'm glad to have you. This is, as a iOS, Mac, Apple guy, this is the week to be on. I know. Thomas, I'm sorry, but...
It's all right. I got some stuff to say about it, too, you know?
Oh, good. Actually, I'm really glad that we're not all just like Mac heads here, because or iOS heads here, because I'd like to get that extra perspective. And the key here is, I think before we jump into the details of... Apple had its big developer conference this week, and they had their usual keynote where they reveal their plans for software plans generally, although there's a big hardware announcement for the rest of the year. And so this is where we get a chance to see what Apple's got planned. And it's easy to get sucked into the reality distortion field and think it's so amazing. I like to make sure we get a perspective from someone who's a little outside that reality distortion field, so we can get a...
That would be me.
Yeah.
That would be me.
So let's hop right into it then. And one of the big things to my mind that they announced was that as of this fall, when they roll it out, iOS will not be an iPad and iPhone. It's going to split, and so there'll still be iOS for your iPhone, but there'll also be iPad OS. Now, the understanding is it's basically the same operating system, but by decoupling them, I guess the idea is they can put features in that are only going to be on an iPad or only going to be on the iPhone, and they don't have to make it work on both. So what do you think this means for iPad from this point on? Do you have a sense of your opinion? What will this do for iPad? I assume it'll probably benefit iPad, but in what ways do you think it's going to be? They plan to make it benefit iPad.
Well, I'm not an iPad user myself, but I think it's clear that it's the way of the future, and just like tablets and touchscreen laptops and things like that. I heard someone say recently just that we all use devices where we touch the screens constantly, more than anything else, and in our smartphones. And so just like letting iPad and its own OS sort of develop on its own and be more and more quote unquote a real computer. I know lots of people that have strong opinions about that, but you can do a lot of things just on an iPhone, and even more so with the screen space of an iPad. And so I think just allowing it to develop and it finally be its own thing, and not just a big version of a thing that we've already seen. I think that's pretty exciting, and can allow for the things that you can only do on a touch screen device, even with Apple Pencil on a big space like that. It can lead to some really interesting uses.
Yeah, speaking of people who think that going iPad only is not think that I'm the guy who wrote the blog post "Going iPad Only is Stupid," which, to be fair, the iPad as of March 2019, trying to do everything on that iPad on an iPad for most people is probably not a good idea. But
yeah,
your point is still valid. We're heading in a direction.
And I think also the from a developer's perspective, it's difficult to program an iOS program, because if your intention is to use it on an iPad, it's a very different use case than using it on a tiny little iPhone screen. And so, especially from a gaming perspective, touching a screen on an iPhone is just ridiculous to try and touch small little spaces. Whereas if you have a much larger iPad screen, you can actually touch and do like a real-time strategy game where you can touch different parts of the screen and have things happen. And so developers have been complaining about this for a while. I know for a fact that this has been one of those things where developing an iOS game is really difficult because you're constantly trying to worry about, well, which screen is it going to be played on exactly?
Right.
And then there are some that get around it by saying, oh, this is only for the iPad version of OS of the iOS, and then others that try and make a control switch so you can turn it on or off depending on how you want to interact with the game. So I think this is a good idea. I really do like it. Google is trying something similar right now. They have an Android and then an Android Go operating system that is like not exactly the same concept because they're not limited by having a certain set number of devices, but it does divide what people are going to be programming for it and what's going to be coming out for that particular environment.
Yeah, you make a good point, which is that in some ways, the iPad and iPhone have been separate for a while because there have been apps which were iPhone only or iPad only or very separate from one another, or they come out in different forms, just like you have an iPhone, iPad, and Mac versions of an app.
Right.
So some of this is sort of that's a good point. Some of this is sort of existed already. Some of the things that they're gonna be bringing for iPad OS is we'll now have multiple apps or multiple windows. We've had that slide over thing for a while. Now you can have multiple windows open, just like we've had on a Mac and a Windows for years. We'll have widgets on the home screen alongside your apps, which is something that Android has had, which we actually in our recent iPhone versus Android show we talked about, and having those on the screen is a big deal for me. Like I want to be able to use my iPad as a primary device more often. Like sometimes I'll want to go edit a show on my patio when it's nice out. I'm not gonna drag my iMac out there. It's just not gonna happen. So I bring my laptop, but I'd love to bring my iPad, but I feel too hamstrung getting the data in and out. Now you're going to be able to have hook up hard drives and thumb drives and have multiple windows, and suddenly things are starting to look a lot more possible, which is really nice to hear. And even mouse support, which is kind of hidden in the accessibility area. I mean that it's really starting to feel like a real workstation.
I think for a lot of maybe younger people, that's their computer, and maybe their family has some sort of desktop or they use them at school, but like an iPad might be the thing that they most interact with and most kind of access the internet and access different apps. And I think just to make it more and more capable is just going to be a huge help as they learn to use different apps and learn to do different things on the computer that you can now do on an iPad.
I wonder too if this is going to be a laptop killer. I think that might be where Mac is trying to angle with this. Is that this is a desktop does a specific set of things, and an iPad does a specific set of things now. But if we can expand the use of an iPad just a little bit, like you said, it's something portable that you can take out to the patio and do some work on. That's really what their desktop is kind of fitting the role of at the moment. And if you can just cut that middleman, then you don't really need that extra step of having the desktop thing. And then, maybe iPad is going to start moving into that like flippable, you got the keyboard on it that can flip over to the back and you can use it as a tablet, and it starts moving more into that angle of things. I'd like to see that personally. I think that the laptops that Mac makes really are, as I'm sitting here talking to you guys on a Mac laptop, I really don't think they're worth as much as the hardcore Mac computer or the iPad if it were beefed up.
Yeah, I would think. I think that there's a large number of people, who their use case for a computer, the things that they do in a computer 90% of the time, could, with just a little bit more capability in an iPad could substitute for it. Like my wife uses a MacBook Air for her work, which is for her commuter use. She's on Facebook she's on Messenger, she's on websites. She's not doing. She's writing things. not doing heavy lifting. She's not editing audio and video or whatever. Even doing heavy duty spreadsheets, which you could do on an iPad. But for her, there's still a little bit of a barrier, maybe even just a generational age barrier to not having that regular form factor. But it's not going to take much to really push this device onto a lot of desks instead of a MacBook or other laptops. And I think you're right there. One of the things you mentioned, Father, about like the kids using the iPads, we have a bunch of hand-me-down iPad 2s that we pick up. Pat, who is a regular on our show, my mother-in-law, she often picks them up from clients who are upgrading, and she'll send us them. And so we have like basically disposable iPad 2s and 3s. And my kids, they use those. When I put a keyboard in front of them, they don't know what to do with it. Like it's a screen. They touch the screen. It's very confusing.
As a tech teacher, I can attest to this. I have had every year when they come back from summer, I have to reteach them. No, you don't touch the screens on my computer in the tech lab.
That's right. So, in addition to the iPad OS, now we have iOS 13 was revealed, and some important things with that. One of the things, a little thing for me, is the idea that in video editing, you can now rotate the video. No more vertical video, folks. Rotate your video. But that's a little thing. One of the things that I thought was very interesting was they talk about sign in with Apple ID, and I don't think it was really clear in the news coverage of this what this is. You go all around the web and you see, sign in with your Facebook account or sign in with Google. Well, when you sign in with your Facebook account, you're giving Facebook more information about how you use your device and how you use the internet, and sometimes even what you're doing on a website. And a little while ago, I decided I didn't want to do that anymore, and I switched all of those sites because it was convenient. You just press a button and you're in, right? But I said I'd rather have to enter my passwords, especially since iOS 11 got the really nice integration with password managers. I said I'm going to just go back to a password. But this, Apple's offering a service, and what makes it different from the others is they encrypt the email address that you used to sign in with, and none of that information goes to either the website, except that it's your account, or Apple. Apple doesn't know what you're signing in, that you're signing into a particular thing. It's encrypted. I'm not sure of the exact actual details of it, but the idea is that it's private, and it's convenient because if you're doing it on your phone, like a lot of times you download a new app, they want you to create an account and sign in. It's such a pain. You got to create a password and put it in your account, your password manager. This is you'll just sign in with your Apple ID and you're in. You have a new account with whatever service is connected to that app. So I think that's a big thing with it. What do you think? What do you think of other features in iOS 13 as well?
For me, it's the new iOS is always exciting because it's the computer I use more than anything that sits on a desk or has a keyboard. Like I'm using my phone for work things, for ministry things all the time, and even just that particular thing of signing in with Apple ID, I have been impressed with just the integration with like the keychain, and I use 1Password and things like that. But I was watching the video explaining this feature, just that it generates a new email address for every one of those things that you sign up for. And then you can go back in your settings and like, nope, I'm done with this one. And you stop getting emails from them. And that's a really interesting thing. They seem to do a good job with this stuff in a way that maybe I'm just too trusting. But we're always afraid of these companies and, entrusting too much to one. But I like that Apple tries to really keep these things private, that they don't see the whole thing. And if that is really what's happening, that's a really fantastic feature. I guess the other, everybody's freaking out about dark mode. I'm excited about dark mode. I think it's just it'll be a good thing. It'll be a good thing for me.
I agree. Dark mode on a phone, I agree. Dark mode on a big screen, not as much.
Yeah.
I grew up with amber on black screens or green on black screens, and going to bed and seeing the green on your inside your eyelids. Yeah, I remember that as a kid. But you make an interesting point. I saw a headline today that says privacy isn't Apple's brand. Apple is now selling privacy as a service, and it's an interesting idea. Privacy as a service, where they're really making a push where where others are selling you to other companies, we're selling you privacy, and that's a very attractive thing. And as long as they are actually following through on it.
They seem to be following through on it too, though. When you go back to like the that whole issue that they had where there was the supposed terrorist's phone that the multiple agencies couldn't unlock, and Apple wasn't going to step in and make a backdoor for them. So I think that in the fact that your phones are encrypted by default, that is amazing to me. That's something that as an Android user, you have to jump through a couple of different hoops to get your phone encrypted. And it doesn't come as a default. It's not an option that's readily apparent to a user who's not interested in security. So that's I think that it feels like they're doing a good job of it. And if they're doing a good job of it at all, they've been audited on it, so they are definitely doing at least a good enough job to fool auditors, which is pretty impressive because I think everybody has their hackles up when it comes to Apple. It's like, oh my gosh, this corporation must be doing something evil. And it doesn't seem like they are. It seems like they're actually genuinely banking on the moment right now of people being interested in security and not really knowing how to do it themselves. So they're offering that as a service. And it's a great idea.
There was a recent article I saw that where there were security researchers were saying Apple needs to put hooks or holes in their system so that we can use security auditing software more easily. Because if they don't let us audit, do our research, we don't know if it's really secure. And It's like, okay, so we have to weaken the wall in order to make sure the wall is strong. But I also get that maybe the wall really isn't strong, and we should let them put holes in it to make sure it's strong. It's a tough question. But I kind of err on the side of, well, let's just assume the wall is strong and not put holes in on purpose. That would be one. Yeah. So another feature of iOS 13 that looked really interesting to me was this audio sharing with AirPods thing. That where if you have the AirPods and someone else has the AirPods and they have their iPhone, and say you're listening to something on your phone, they can tap their phone on your phone, and it will automatically connect that person's AirPods to your phone, so you're both listening to the same thing. And I mean, this isn't something I do much as an adult, but I know especially for kids who listen to music, and when I was sharing an earbuds, that sort of thing. Although that's gross, don't do that. Put other people's earbuds in your ears. That's kind of gross. But but I'd say that's a good solution to it. So I find that's innovative. I like that kind of thinking. It solves the problem.
It is really clever, and I remember I bought AirPods and I love them, and I felt really self-conscious about wearing them anywhere in public because when I first got them, I didn't see them anywhere. Yeah. And now they're absolutely everywhere, and especially with like teenagers and young adults, that's the way they listen to music, and to share that way it's just like a clever thing where they looked at the reality of how people use these devices and say, well, we can make this easier. And that's really, right. I'm glad they're thinking that way.
I love the audacity of it too, that, oh, well, everybody has an iPhone.
Right. And AirPods.
Exactly. Everybody has this equipment. This is all. And I think that's one of the ways that the whole Mac environment is really pushing forward their community, because it's easy. It's just easy to use. It's easy to, just snap your phone onto somebody else's phone, and suddenly you're listening to whatever music they're listening to, and intuitively the operating system's going to kind of know how to do that. So.
And it's easier if you just get the Apple Gear, right?
Right.
You can get $20 Bluetooth headphones, but if you get the AirPods, then you can do this cool stuff, and it's just easier if you just have everything that's Apple branded. It's just, life is easier, right?
Right.
And I have to admit, I've kind of bought into that. I've got all Apple Gear, although I am still an Echo guy and not a HomePod guy, because I still don't think the HomePod is good enough yet. But that's a whole nother discussion. So there's a couple other things I saw. iOS 13 looked interesting. Was the HomeKit now does both routers, so you can automate your Wi-Fi router, and secure video. So they put space in iCloud for your HomeKit enabled security camera to store up to 10 days worth of video, and it doesn't impinge upon any iCloud storage that you're paying for. It's in addition to that. And I think that's a very interesting idea. Again, it's encrypted, it's in a cloud, it's I'm pretty sure it's not going to be watched by like Romanian researchers who work for the company, a la Ring and Amazon, and who are that sort of stuff. I like that idea, and it's not their own cameras. They have third party cameras that they're working with, which is a good thing, because it means it's a larger ecosystem. I mean, in that case, it's sort of the opposite. Rather than Apple branded gear, they kind of open it up to non Apple gear. So I like that. And then this Maps 3D that which has like a street view in it, but instead of jerking forward like in a static picture, it moves like video. So you basically fly through city streets, which is a much more fluid way of seeing how to get to a place. I don't know if that makes sense. You have to kind of see it to understand it. But
I'm excited for kind of any update of Maps, because I like the way it works. Even like Google Maps is just better right now.
Yeah.
But I wish Google Maps looked like Apple Maps. And so seeing them move in that direction is helpful.
I'm a Waze guy myself.
I was gonna bring that one up if nobody else was.
Yeah, I've been a Waze guy for years, and I like Waze, and I still use it. But every time I use Apple Maps, because sometimes Waze just doesn't work for some reason, it's like the servers or something. Every time I use Apple Maps, when I'm driving and it does the haptic tap on my wrist for the take a left turn or right turn, I'm like, man, this makes using Apple Maps that much more attractive. I do like that. So let's talk about macOS Catalina, which is their next operating system for the Mac. One of the big things that was running through the news, and I think we have to do a public service here and explain to people, your iTunes library, your iTunes movies, your iTunes music is not going away. The podcast directory is not going away. Okay? What's going away is a monolithic piece of software on your Mac called iTunes. And instead, it's going to be replaced with 3 apps, just like on your iPhone or on your iPad, an app called Music, an app called TV, and an app called Podcast. So Music will have all of your music in playlists as you have today, and Apple Music will be on a more equal footing. TV will have all your movies and the Apple TV Plus and all that stuff. Podcast, which is the most important part of it of all.
Yes,
definitely will have its own dedicated app, which I think really puts it on a on a equal footing on the Mac finally to music and even TV in the sense of putting it in front of people. So I'm excited by that. What other things did you notice about this that struck out to you on macOS Catalina?
I think the podcast is really interesting, because of all that media, it's the thing that I would say like most kind of like your average internet using person may not use a lot.
Right.
A lot of us listen to podcasts, but like you said, to put it on equal footing with music and TV is huge. The whole iPad apps on the Mac is kind of exciting. Just like I said, I don't use the iPad, but just that these things can cross over more, I think is really helpful. Just as kind of like the iPhone and the iPad having their own versions of things, having iPad Max on the app, really, it seems to make space for people who make these things to have a way bigger audience and be able to do a lot more interesting things.
And it brings those other things to the forefront in a way they haven't been before. The movies were always kind of hidden and hard to get to in iTunes. iTunes was about music, and it started out about music, and it carried on about music, and that's what it always has really been. And I have, to this day, I will remember that I have things hidden in my iTunes that are, videos that I bought at some point. I'm like, oh, hey, I forgot I had that.
Right.
Yeah.
And still haven't watched it in some cases, but it's it's sitting there. And I think this is a good way for them to do that. I'm also interested in what this is going to do as a competitive space, because, you have Amazon Prime movies. you have the Netflix kind of concept of TV shows, and then you have this new Disney streaming service coming up too. I'm interested if Mac is going to try and move into that space where they're going to make this TV thing a little bit more of its own piece. I say that, and then at the same time, I retract that statement too, because they're not Google, and Google would. That's like Google's thing. We're going to spawn this new company. We're going to try it out and see how it goes. And I know that's not Mac's thing, but I'd be really interested to see if they have if they want to try and get in this space while there's still enough room for them to be competitive.
Well, I think the Apple TV Plus, which they unveiled a few months ago, which will be original programming that they're creating for an additional streaming service. It's interesting, but I don't think they envision it as being of the scale of Amazon Prime Video or Netflix or Hulu or even Disney Plus, which have dozens and hundreds of shows. I think from the Apple's standpoint is we do fewer things well. We do
right.
So we have fewer products, but we do it as the way we think is the best way of doing it. And I think that's going to kind of hold true here, where I think the TV app will have that stuff in it, and it will be the way that they get it in front of people on the Mac. And I think it'll be front and center in that app. The idea that they're breaking that out from iTunes, I think that's part of the reason why. I think you're onto something there. Part of the reason why they're breaking this out of iTunes now is so that there is an app called TV on your Mac. So I agree with that. And the same thing, podcasts have a moment in our culture right now. Podcasts are big business. Big businesses are buying podcast networks and companies, and the podcasts are becoming very popular. There are some really big podcasts. I think that's a good sign too. Speaking of the iPads on the Mac, I think that is a big development, because what it means is developers only have to write a program once, and then there's smaller things that they have to do to move it between iPad and the Mac. So they could have one app that's on both. Today, it's almost two whole different code bases, two different sets of code that they have to maintain. And there's this new thing called Swift UI. It's all technical, but what it means is there's only one place you have to go, flip a switch and say, make the user interface for iPad, and then flip the switch the other way. Now make the user interface for Mac. And so the buttons are different and in different places and all that sort of stuff. Now there's just one place to, whereas before there was two different sets of tools that they had to use. So that's really big. And, we've seen some of these apps like News and Voice Memos and the Stock app already from Apple sort of feeling their way into this. I think we'll see these things become much more robust going forward. One of the big things that I thought was sort of flew under the radar a little bit was this idea of authenticate on your Mac with your Apple Watch. Now, here's what happens today. I have an Apple Watch, and I have there's a setting in the Apple Watch app on my phone that if I come to my computer, and there's also a setting on my Mac. If I wake up my Mac, and I'm wearing my Apple Watch, and I'm logged in on my Apple Watch, that's a key. It says, okay, you are present and opening your Mac, so you don't need to enter your password. We'll unlock it for you, like magic. I love this feature when it works. Sometimes for Apple only knows why. It just doesn't work. I'm logged in. I don't know what the problem is. So I love this idea. And so the idea is they're going to take this a step further and say, if you have your watch on and you're authenticated, when it's time to enter a password and say you want to unlock your keychain or maybe 1Password or LastPass or something like that, it will unlock without you having to enter in your long, secure password and just unlock, and you won't have to enter passwords on your Mac to authenticate for things, websites and apps and that sort of thing. And that's really attractive. However, I think it's less secure because the password on my Apple Watch is only 4 digits. So
right.
If someone else knows those 4 numbers and puts my watch on their wrist, which admittedly I always have my watch on unless I'm sleeping or in the shower because I don't have one of those fancy new waterproof ones. But if someone were to do that, they could get into everything. So that makes me a little concerned. What do you think of this?
It's just like maybe one step too far in that way, or just one step on the side of, I don't know. I feel like I need to be more cautious. I like knowing that I'm the one that's doing it, and just being near something shouldn't. It's kind of like the Face ID on my phone. I don't always want it to unlock. I just
Right.
want to look at it and see what message I got, and the fact that it does that on its own it maybe isn't inherently dangerous, but can open up the possibility to someone else doing something that you don't want them to do.
Yeah, just being present is an issue. Like if someone can just sit you down at your computer and say, not even have to say log in, they just sit you down at your computer and suddenly you're logged in, and they can then move you out of the way and do what they need to do. Whereas before, if I have to enter a password, I can enter the wrong password 10 times and lock my computer up, and we're done, So I'm not a big fan. The convenience is nice, but I think that you run the risk then of falling into that trap of you have to give up a little bit of convenience to get security. You do. It's the truth. And this is kind of a step backwards in that range.
Yeah, you don't even need to be sitting at the desk. You could be in the room with it, and they're like, okay, you sit over in that chair over there, and we unlock your computer just because you happen to be near it. That is, you don't have to say a word, you don't have to do a thing except be present. Think about that from a legal standpoint. If how that would be tested. Like right now, the court says you don't have to put your thumb or fingerprint on a fingerprint reader on your phone, but there's nothing that says they can't hold your phone up to your face and get your Face ID to unlock it. Or even this, where if you're wearing that watch and you haven't taken it off and still authenticated. So if you ever get in a point where if someone's going to break into your computer, take your watch off right away.
Right.
So they can't log in. So keep that in mind. All right. So another thing that they have on macOS Catalina is this new Find My. And I saw this before, and I talked about this. I saw a rumor about it. And so we have Find My Friends, and today we have Find My iPhone, or really, which is Find My Devices. You can look for your iPad and your watch and your AirPods and your Mac even, and all that sort of stuff in these apps. And now they're going to combine into one where, my friends and my devices are at equal find level. And one thing they've added is if your device, say my iPhone, I drop my iPhone in the city somewhere, if there's another iPhone or iPad or Mac within Bluetooth range of it, and it's up to date, we stipulate that it's up to get the latest operating system, it will ping and say, hey, I found your device, like when I'm looking for it. It'll say, your device was seen here. Even if the phone is asleep or in low power mode. No, actually, low power mode, it might not work because it does need Bluetooth, and that turns off with low power mode. But if it's asleep or low, in a state that's not normally awake, it will find it. And I like that. Now, there are services like that already with like Tile and Tracker with a R and no E, and a couple others like that, where they use the same sort of distributed web of low power Bluetooth devices, which relies on there being many people with these things who are, the odds are someone will be close to your device at some point. The big difference here is we come back to that privacy as a service. Apple did not announce any additional devices. They could coming up, this fall maybe, but Apple, the way Apple implements it is, they don't see where your things are. Everything is double encrypted and it's all kind of secure. They don't keep track. What do you think of this, though? What do you think of this idea of this distributed way of finding your thing?
As long as they're doing what they say they're doing, I think that's the thing. Because when I first heard that, I was like, so they have like this virtual map of everybody and every single one that has this activated. But I think, it could be. I mean, the terror of losing your phone is a real thing, and so much of our lives is on these devices. And if it makes it that much easier that it's not just gone forever, or if it's stolen or something like that. But I think it does come back to that trusting that it is all encrypted, that it is all actually private.
And this is one of those areas where you get into the realm of metadata being significant, and even encrypting everything, there are still levels of being able to tell who has their Bluetooth devices on, and being able to, I can see places to use this with RFID and with Bluetooth to identify who is seeing the device, and being able to kind of ping off of that information and scrape some of that information to use. Even if everything's encrypted, you can still get some very high level data that can still give you a lot of really interesting information about who's where when. And that to me is dangerous. And that's something that it's nice, it's convenient, but again, it's like we're opening up more room for hackers to do hacker things.
Of course, the phone networks already have all this data, right? They know where all of where we are at all times. I mean, it's just the fact of that phones being on a network. So this is how they say it works. According to Apple, as relayed through Wired magazine, it requires the user to have at least 2 Apple devices. Each device emits a constantly changing public key that nearby Apple devices use to encrypt and upload your geolocation data, or your device's geolocation data. Only other Apple devices that you own and are linked to your Apple ID, and thus protected with 2-step authentication, are able to decrypt those locations. So if I lose my phone, I have to have an iPad or a Mac that I'm logged into iCloud with on the same account, and only then can these devices decrypt the key. So it's an interesting. It gives us a little more than what we had before. I mean, I've known people who've lost devices or had them stolen, and because the thief turns off the cellular, or turns off Wi-Fi, or they don't put it on a Wi-Fi network, they can never find it. But as long as that Bluetooth is on, and maybe these will get more sophisticated or something. But it's that extra step, it's that extra level. So I think you're right, Father. As long as Apple is doing what they say they do, and Thomas, you're right too. There is metadata attached to us that we have to be aware of. That this doesn't solve all of the security problems. Put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep. Okay. So I think that's the key to these things is we always have to be aware of the pros and the cons. Every security solution has both pros and cons, ways that they make us more secure, and maybe ways that we're less secure that we weren't aware before. And I think that's the key here. So let's move on to watchOS quickly to talk about that. It's really becoming a health device, really, the way they're pushing it. And there's things like they have new watch faces, and they put an Apple Store on the watch. But one of the things that they mentioned was this new capability for cycle tracking. Now, none of us here are women, obviously, but 2 of us are at least married to women who have had children, so we understand how this works. But it's a menstrual cycle tracking system. The reason I bring it up is from a Catholic moral standpoint, where in the Catholic Church teaches that artificial contraception is immoral, and so she says there are ways of regulating birth. I'm trying to make sure I use the right language. Regulating birth that is in accord with both our biology and morality, and one of those is to track your fertility cycle. And my wife and I, we've been married for 13 years almost now, and through our whole marriage, she's charted and all that sort of stuff. And we have books, and we have thermometers, and we have all this stuff, and it's very complicated. And I could never remember exactly is it 6/3 or 3/6 and all these other things. And so this promises to help keep track of the cycle. I'm not sure whether it's still a manual process or whether it's monitoring temperatures or what, but I'm kind of curious.
I imagine and this is I've seriously contemplated getting this for my wife, because it's still an issue for us, keeping track of all this stuff. And one of the things that's really difficult for us is because of our sleep schedules, because things are so weird with our sleep schedules, having a nursing baby, or just being woken up in the middle of the night or whatever. Taking your temperature at the exact same time every single day.
Yeah.
it's not easy. And so if you had a device that was monitoring that regularly and could take a base, an optimal reading that's just a baseline temperature, it gives you such a phenomenally accurate reading that you would never be able to get. You'd have to sit there and temp constantly over the course of the day to be able to get that same kind of thing. Whereas this device could just like read it and average it out for you and say, here's your base temperature for today. And then whenever you go sit down, even if it's just manually sitting down to do your charts with that piece of information,
right,
you're already way ahead of the game.
And I look at the kind of the fear on the faces of couples I'm preparing when I point them towards like, they're doing their pre-Cana or whatever, and they do a talk about natural family planning, and it's so outside of like our popular culture. And then when they get into the details, like, oh, this could be complicated. If technology can make this easier for people to like live in this like natural, healthy way that God's given, then gosh, like that's such a great gift.
Yeah. Absolutely. According to Apple's information, so the new app gives women the ability to log information related to their cycles and see predicted timing for their next period and fertile window. So the daily log enables the quick addition of information related to the cycle, including current period flows, symptoms, results from ovulation prediction kits, and other elements. So presumably you'd still take your temperature with a thermometer if you're using the symptothermal method, which a lot of people do. But I can see maybe a future Apple Watch, in addition to having, say, a glucose meter in the back of it, which I know they're trying to develop. Maybe if it has a basal thermometer somehow that they've developed. I mean, that's the sort of thing I like. I look forward to the future, so that, say, when my daughters are married or my sons get married and their wives are needing to do this, they don't have to have the same Stone knives and bearskins, as Captain Kirk once said, method of trying to do things. They have this advanced technology, which just makes life easier, and frankly, I'd like to see that it could share with their husband.
Yeah.
Green light or like red light or something. All I need to know is green light or red light, honey. So I find that interesting that there's more and more of this, and we have to come back to this topic of apps that help predict both menstruation and fertility, because there's a bit of a controversy over them out there. The fact that some of these apps are backed by pro-lifers, and that makes some people pause. But that's a future topic that I want to get to. The only other big announcement was the Mac Pro. I don't think that's really a big thing for our audience. I mean, I don't think, if you are a video producer or some kind of photographer, professional photographer, somebody who needs to use pro level editing bay software, that sort of thing, if you're making movies or film scores, that the Mac Pro is for a very limited audience. And so it's a beautiful piece of hardware, but it starts at $6,000 and it's probably going to go up to $35,000 when you max it out. I mean, it's a lovely looking computer with it's just the specs on it are mind boggling. And then then you could also get this Pro display, which is $5,000 with a $1,000 stand and all this stuff. But the thing I really want to bring up is the idea that we have an iMac Pro that they introduced last year, and then we have a Mac Pro. So the iMac Pro is for professional use at a particular level. Then there's a Mac Pro which goes beyond that to like even more. And we also have an iMac. Should we have a, for lack of a better word, Mac, not Pro? Not the Mac Mini. I feel like the Mac Mini is sort of like the MacBook and the MacBook Air, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Whereas I feel like there's a space in the lineup for a Mac that's expandable, that is not a Mac Pro. That could be modular in some way. What do you think of that?
Yeah,
I would love to see that.
Yeah. When you think of Mac, you don't think of just like a normal desktop computer. It's kind of like either like a MacBook Air, which is what I use and is tiny, or like these unbelievably powerful computers that are unbelievably expensive.
Right.
But yeah, I just don't. Not many people I know. It's like, oh, it's just my desktop computer, and maybe there is something that can be in there.
I love my iMac. I really do. But, in a year or so, I'm going to be saying, man, I need a bigger hard drive. I need a better audio video card. And it's just, or I need more ports. Frankly, right now, I need more ports on this thing. I've got mixers and things all connected to it. And it would be nice to be able to expand, and as the need arose.
I think that there's something lost in this generation of the tinkerer that made the original computers. Those guys that sat down with electronics boards. I brought electronics back to our school, and I'm teaching it to the 7th and 8th graders. We have like an electronics program, and man, these kids' faces light up when we tear this stuff open and just start looking at the guts on the inside of these computers. And it's something that they're missing out on. I remember doing it as a kid, having these clunky computers that were put together by a shop down the street, and I got to sit and watch them put it together, and I got to take bits out and put new bits in whenever things got old. I would love to see the return of something like that.
Yeah, I remember my gateway desktop that I had in college, and personally cramming the network card in there, and how satisfying it was to, like, I did this, I put this together. And even like watching my brother put together like a gaming computer back in the day. That
I had an Apple II GS many, many moons ago, and I remember getting a third-party RAM disk. So it was a 640K persistent RAM, so that I didn't have to so that as long as the computer was on, it kept the operating system alive, so that turning the computer on was instantaneous. I didn't have to wait for the operating system to load off a floppy, and it even had this lead acid battery that connected to it off the back. Is a rechargeable battery that would allow it to even when I had to restart the computer, it would keep it alive. I mean, but it was so satisfying, to put cards in and to get in there and to upgrade your computer and to feel like this isn't just a little closed box like my phone is, that it's something that's mine that I can do with what I want.
Yeah. I'd like to see phones that did this. There was talk for a little while about a Linux phone that was going to be modular, and it was going to be able to snap in different things. You could replace your camera, you could replace your headphone jack or whatever it was, and it just died because I think there just wasn't enough interest. First off, because people liked just having phones that were pre-assembled, and then also there were some issues with the operating system and how it was going to work with the cell phone carriers. So
I can imagine their size would have been an issue too, because when you have to build in connectors and the casing and all that sort of stuff, the thing would probably look like a brick when you were done with it. But
I would have gladly carried that brick.
I mean, I don't
just for the ability to be able to make it myself.
Yeah, I know Google was looking at that, something like that as well. They ended that. So that was Apple's big announcements, and I think that pretty much wraps up the big tech announcement season for the spring. The summer, it kind of gets a little slow. There's not much going on until the fall when phones and iPhones and stuff start getting announced. So I think that sort of wraps that up. And so if folks have anything that they want to talk about, any part of the announcement that we didn't mention that they thought was significant, or if they want to comment on some of the stuff we've talked about today, we'd love to hear from you. Our email is technology@sqpn.com, and let us know. We love hearing from you. So we had a second segment, but I think I want to we kind of spent a lot of time talking about the WWDC. We'll save that for another time. But so I kind of want to go to our picks of the week. Father Michael, do you have a pick of the week this week?
I do. It's kind of an abstract one, but I thought it was really important. Is muting people on Twitter occurred to me this week. Just that it's a really powerful technology that can really be good for your mental and spiritual and emotional health. There was just all these dumb kind of Catholic Twitter fights this week, and and I just watching, I was like, this is doing me no good to follow this drama and to be angry and kind of just judging people, and just like, I can make it go away for a week, I can make somebody go away for a month, and it's better for me, it's better for them, and I think we don't have to follow every little thing, and I know it's a lesson for myself. So don't be afraid to mute. Every Twitter client will let you do that, and it's the way. It's a good way to live.
So that's what I was going to ask. I know that Tweetbot, which is my Twitter client of choice, does it. But will the native Twitter apps let you mute somebody?
Yeah,
okay,
I use
good.
Tweetbot too.
Yeah, you can mute on the native Twitter apps.
Good.
It's one of those things. Don't read everything. You are under no obligation to read everything that comes through your feed. Just remember that is going to save you so much headache in life.
And it lowers the barrier. Like, I don't want to unfriend or unfollow somebody. That feels like a huge step. I mean, they're just annoying me right now. It's not like I never want to hear from them again. So muting is a way of saying, look, we need to take a break. Remember, like Friends with Rachel and Ross? We were on a break, okay? And that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a break from one another. And I think that's an excellent tip this week is remember that you can mute people on social media.
Well, there's some people that I have permanently muted. I'm still their friend, and so I can still go pop in on their page and look at their stuff. And when I do, I remind myself, oh, that's why I don't have them flowing through my feed.
Yeah, and they don't notice. Like if you unfriend someone or unfollow, sometimes they might notice that you've unfollowed or unfriended, and that creates new drama that nobody really needs. So
exactly,
that's good.
Exactly.
All right, Thomas, what's your pick this week?
For my pick this week, I'm going with meetup.com, which is more of an app than it is a website. You can get to it as a website, but I use it as an app. It is fantastic for finding interest groups near you. I have had some great success with it. I've had great success finding tabletop role-playing groups. I had a Python developer group that I joined for a little while that I found on Meetup. And it's just groups of people that you wouldn't know about otherwise that are able to advertise themselves and find people in your area that can meet up. I just went to one tonight. That's actually, I was a little bit late for starting our podcast because I was coming back from it, but it was the Tampa Bay Writers Alliance. So it's a group of writers in the area, and we had a writing exercise. It was a lot of fun. I had a really good time.
Yeah, I'm looking at the front page now, so it's showing me groups near me, and there's a hiking club, an AI discussion group. It's Boston, so they'll be there.
Right.
Several groups for singles or people in their 20s and 30s who are single. And then things like Intro to Soldering, which I'm like,
right,
that's kind of
cool. Yeah, see, there you go.
I might want to take that. Or running groups or language groups or even learning to cook. So that looks really neat. I like that. It's a great suggestion. It gets us out from behind our desks and into the world. That's a good one.
Yeah, and really the great thing about it is like you can judge. You can tell pretty well whether or not it's going to be a legitimate group. And most of these groups meet at public places, so there's never really like a worry about it. Like I went to this one tonight thinking there were gonna be like maybe 5-6 people there. There were almost 20 people at this writers guild that's there. So
wow.
It can be really neat. And I found role playing groups on it, and I went expecting like a small group, and it ended up being almost 30 people that were at the role playing group. So
I just found one called Monastic Cooking Club, a group for anyone interested in prayer and cooking in the traditional and monastic approach to culinary service through prayer and work, or ora et labora, contemplative and practical activities in the kitchen or on the table. So there's a Catholic group on Meetup for you if you're in the Boston area. That's awesome. Great pick. I might have to check some of these out. So mine is kind of geeky, kind of gets in the weeds. This is for people who really want to get into their hands dirty inside their virtually inside their Mac. It's a piece of software called Lock Rattler, and it is kind of like what you think. When you rattle a lock, make sure the lock is locked. Lock Rattler is a piece of software that checks that your Mac's basic security systems are active and up to date. And so it gives you information. It says, okay, system integrity protection is enabled, which it should be on a standard installation, unless you've specifically turned it off. That is basic. It tells you the versions of some security features like Gatekeeper and XProtect. It tells you whether File Vault is on or off. Whether the status of your latest malware, they have malware or blacklists that they download for you, and you can whether you have your firmware password turned on or not. So it it doesn't, you don't go in and do a lot of things with it. It's just I run it once a month on my computers just to see that everything is copacetic, everything is the way it should be, that's not reporting any dangerous vulnerabilities, that I haven't installed a piece of software that turned off something, and that everything is. It will tell me if everything is up to date or the last time an update has been run on these various parts of the system. So it's a nice sort of peace of mind software. It may not be for everybody, but I like it as a bit of security for me, and maybe it'll give you some insight into what your computer is doing. That's sometimes hidden. So we'll have links to that into the meetup.com in the show notes today, so that you can see those. So I think that's about it from us. So what do you think of our discussion and our picks of the week? You can go to sqpn.com/technology or the SQPN Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia and leave us some feedback. Or like I said before, send us an email to technology@sqpn.com, and I'll put any relevant links from our discussion, including to our picks, on our show notes at sqpn.com. I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Technology. And when I say make it possible, without patrons, this doesn't happen. We don't have shows, any of our shows, and we need patrons, most especially. And if you have any ability to help us with that, to give us any type of financial support, we would greatly appreciate it. This week, we're thanking Patricia R., Ron S., Ryan W., Marion M., and Lisa R. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Technology and all the shows at StarQuest, and you could join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And also, one little other piece of business, if you can, could you remember to like the episodes of Secrets of Technology on Facebook, or to retweet them on Twitter, where we're at SQPN, and to leave comments, and that helps get the word out to other people about the show and spreads the news about it. So until next time, Father Michael Gossett, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Technology.
Thank you, Dom.
Thomas Sanahuro, thank you as well.
Thanks for having me.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.